I was actually born in Namibia. It used to be called Southwest Africa. And my father and my mother's Scottish, but they were from Cape Town. But my father loved fishing, and so at the time I was born, he was on a boat, a fishing trawler, and I was born in a place called Walsh Bay. For me, I didn't feel like I had family really. So I didn't grow up with my half brothers and sisters. I grew up with my brother. My mother was a severe alcoholic who died when I was 17 because of alcohol abuse complications. So from a very young age we decided she was not a mother. So I loved her, but we couldn't spend time with her per se. We couldn't consider, I didn't consider her a mother. And my father was a crazy business person who divorced my mom when we were very young. In hindsight, I mean, back then we might have thought he could have maybe given us more assistance, but the truth is he was going through hell as well, as I found out much later.
Did you have a relationship with your dad, or was there quite a gap there?
Yeah, it was. I think it was a bit of a strained relationship. We were in hostels. We lived with our mom. As soon as Michael finished school, he left straight away, and I wasn't very close to Michael either. So yeah, we didn't. Let's put it this way: like no one ever sat us down and spoke to us about what's going on. It was just like put on our plate, and that was it. I mean, this is why I believe I want to connect people with a different journey in life, because I didn't have connection as a child. So I felt very, very lost.
Your dad growing up, was there something that stood out as he equipped you with something for life?
I mean, Dad was like, he actually did some amazing things for us. I mean, he was an entrepreneur, so firstly, my entrepreneurial background must probably come from watching him and all his successes and struggles. He was one of those crazy people that went up and down like a yo-yo. But he gave us an incredible amount of freedom. I remember a number of incidences where he really just let us be who we wanted to be, which I really appreciate, because I think that's such an endearing quality in life, and a lot of parents don't do that.
Yeah.
They don't let kids grow up and figure things out themselves. I don't know, I just feel a sense of appreciation for it. He looked after us. He wasn't there emotionally for us. It wasn't really his thing, but we're very close now. I've learned incredible things about him now. He's in his 80s, and I still go like, I didn't know any of this stuff. Like it feels like most of my life I didn't know.
Brian, you are a dad. Tell us about that.
It's a strange kind of scenario. That part of my life, which I'm also incredibly grateful for, and I think both Karen and I, my ex-wife, we always say like we didn't have the greatest marriage, but we produced something pretty cool out of it. Kayla's, an amazing girl, as is Dylan, my stepson, and I'm really blessed that I get to have them in my life in doses that don't, make me go off track at all. And I think, Kayla wants to be an entrepreneur, so who knows what might happen in the future as she grows up.
Did you know what you wanted to do when you were little? No.
I got into music. My brother was a guitarist. I loved rock music, which in those days in Cape Town was not a very common form of music. And I got into music because it was, like music often is, it's a great form of expression. And I guess with rock music there was an essence of anger. I was like a pacifist, so I was the opposite. I was a headband. I used to have hair, long hair. It's a bit curly, but anyway. I would have been maybe 20 now, 19, 20 years old. And I tried to put on this concert tour, but it completely bombed. I mean, like the only event that was full was the press launch event, which was for free, and every other event we had to cancel most of them. And we knew it was really a problem because we knew we had failed, but we had to finish this one. And the bands were really cool. They just played, with the few people who were there. And that was it. We knew it was finished because we had already decided, and we went back. And there was this kind of real mixed emotion of like weight off the shoulder and complete failure and complete disaster, because the weight off the shoulder was it was finished, it was over, and my dad had offered to bail us out. And the disaster was like, why was it such a failure?
So what is failure to you?
Failure is an essential ingredient to success. And I think I was never scared of failure, because I failed when I was very young the first time. That's why I had to go and work for my dad for a few years, because he had to bail me out. I mean, I experienced the pain of failure even before that, putting on a gig for one of my bands and very few people pitching up. that sort of empty, I still remember that empty gut feeling where you've got this whole club and there's like, 12 people or something that have come to watch your band. And it's funny because that feeling has reared its ugly head. Even now that we put thousands and thousands of people in a room, I still have that little feeling of like, oh, I hope people pitch.
And when you started going into the music scene, was there a mentor?
The concept of mentorship or somebody guiding you was never in my radar because I'd never experienced it in any aspect. So I kind of self-taught myself everything. So first live gig, not knowing how to use a mixing desk. That was with my brother's band, but it was okay. They weren't that good at the beginning. Like they were pretty good afterwards. But it was literally crash course. There were a couple of I can't think of many people that sort of no one took me under their wing.
So if you didn't have a mentor, then who was your first mentor?
It's all a kind of blur up until about 25, 26 when I met a guy called Emil Ratelband, who's a prodigy of Tony Robbins. I didn't know any of this at the time, but I was part of an organization called Junior Chamber. For us it was a social organization, but and we got this message from the Dutch chambers saying this guy's coming to South Africa, will you look after him? And we didn't know who he was. And that's the first time I'd heard of anything to do with personal development or growth or any kind of mentorship. It turned out he was the biggest selling non-fiction author in the history of Dutch literature.
Oh, wow.
He was one of the most famous people in Holland at the time. I didn't get that. He looked smart, but I was 20. I was more interested in having fun. So in South Africa, I was the only chapter in Durban at the time where I was living that kind of put on an event that he was happy with. And so he sort of expressed that at the end. He was this really big, Dutch guy, and he was like, oh, really, really, really like what you did. And he said, listen, you ever come to Holland, you come visit me, I'll never forget that. To me, that was an open invitation, not knowing who he was, of course, because I hadn't really done a lot of research. And I said, I want to go, because I was like lost and not happy. And so off I went, and I was talking to his daughter because he was in Germany. She said, no, listen, just, come to the house. I'm not sure when he's going to be back. And by the way, I spent my last, money getting to the gates, which were far out of town, just in case you need to know. And then I sort of rang the bell, and his daughter came on the intercom and said, oh, no, Emil's only going to be back tomorrow. I didn't have any money to go anywhere, so I went to the forest. I was reading Tony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power. First time ever I've read a personal help book, so I'm trying to, like Tony's hyping me up, and I'm like, and then a little deer came out, started eating, and I had this whole conversation. I can't remember what the conversation was about, but it was quite intimate, I think. I think it was one of my first very reflective times in life. And eventually went back to the house, and then, oh, Emil's only going to be here tomorrow. So I'm like, oh, okay, now what? And she's like, well, there's a youth hostel, you can just go stay. And I'm like, so then I had to pack up and tell her that I have no money. And so her brother and her came down to the gate, took me up into Emil's house. He had like about 8 garages, and he had underground garages as well. This was an indication that this is not the person I thought he was. And then his offices were above these 8 garages, and then we went in there, and they found the petty cash tin, and they broke it up open because they didn't have. I loved these kids. We got on really well. They just like, whatever. They broke it open, take this change out, gave it to me, and said, now go to the youth hostel, and then we'll send a meal to pick you up the next morning. So I was like, okay. And it just gets weirder and weirder. So I stay for a night. But in the youth hostels, then you had to get out by a certain time in the morning. So I think like 9 o'clock, everyone had to be gone. But I didn't know when Emil was going to come. And, and so I was like, no, I can't go. And they said, no, you have to go. You can only come back at a certain time. And I said, no, I can't go because Emil Ratelband's going to come and get me. And they literally laughed at me. And I was like, and I'm like, no, but seriously. And they're like, they were talking in Dutch behind me, And it was the craziest thing because he arrives in his custom-built Bentley, and then he walks through the door and he just shouts at me. So I went from like the important guy
to like shriveling.
to shriveling down because he's like, what? You tell me you come here, you have no money, blah, 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 and I'm like, and then he just says, come, you come stay with me, and that's, it's the craziest thing. And then I stayed with him for 6 weeks, and there's other crazy stories that happened. It was a weird experience, but the weirdest thing of all is, there were many things like this happening in my life, especially from that point. And I had no indication, I had no inkling in my head that I was being privileged to have these experiences. So that because one day I would be on stage talking to people and a teacher and, promoting some of the biggest speakers in the world. I think my whole life had been telling me that I'm supposed to do something special with it. And it took until probably last year where I truly believed that I will take responsibility for that. And that's at the age of 48. It was this crazy experience because there were so many weird things that happened. I went to, as part of Junior Chamber as the incoming president, they would send you to Japan And again, I was broke, I had no money. The bank that was actually circus trading me sponsored me to go to Japan. And I had to borrow a friend's suit that didn't even fit me. And I went to Japan where there were 96 incoming presidents from 96 different countries in the world. And this crazy thing happened because at the end of the 3-day workshop, you're there for about 7 days. But there was this American leadership trainer, I can't remember his name, and he asked people in the room when he counted to 3 to stand up. So it was like this kind of chaos technique. So because there's about 150 people that were with the Japanese delegates that paid in those days $10,000 to be at this place. And then it was like, he said, when I say go, you stand up and you walk to the person you think is going to have the greatest impact on a global basis. And I thought I was going to go and walk to my friend Alan, who was from Australia, because he had bright red hair and he was going to be the easiest to spot. But I stood up and I saw he was right on the other side of the room because I could just see this like bright red hair, and I started walking and I'm like, it's chaos because everyone's walking right into each other. But I just couldn't move. It just felt like I took 2 steps and then I couldn't go anywhere else. And it turned out the most people in the room that walked to me. And it was the weirdest thing. And I didn't even get it. I was like, I didn't understand why. Why would I stand out in such a diverse leadership or place where I was probably the least qualified to be a leader out of everyone in that room? And it's just, it's these things happening, and it's only much later in life that I look back and realized my whole life was set up where like the universe was just saying, you have to do something. I might have believed consciously that I wanted to succeed or that I could succeed with it, but at a subconscious level, because of all the lack of self-worth and all the other stuff that had come out of that childhood and growing up, I think I had to, I could only manifest a failure. And that felt like 20-something years of my life until I kind of got a realization of that, because I seemed to fail at everything I did.
So when did that change?
In my 30s, I'd always said when I'm 40, I'm going to be in the best financial shape of my life. And I remember coming up with that in my early 30s somewhere. And I said it thousands of times over. Like, it's cool until you kind of get closer to 40. And 40 was 2 years prior to this. And I remember my 40th birthday like it was yesterday, because I remember waking up in this small little dingy place on a farm that I lived with this 1-bedroom kind of little studio, minute, smaller than this lounge we're in, the whole place.
Yeah.
Ironically. And I woke up in a single bed, like an army kind of style, steel bed. And my little voice was like, hey, happy birthday. How's it going? Like that damn little voice. It literally was like, and I remember saying to it, I never said when I turned 40, I said when I'm 40. And I just turned 40, which means I'm 40 for a year. And it would have been an amazing story if I got to 41 and was successful, but I was actually worse off when I got to 41 than I was 40.
Oh no, Brian, why?
And so this was a year, so now I was going into my 42nd year. I was going to turn 42 in March. And after the break and the holiday, which was normally escape in those days, I thought, this is it. I don't even want to live if this is what life's going to be like. And it was in that moment, or that moment that was probably a week or two of depression, because when you ask yourself what's wrong with you, your brain's very obliging to tell you how stupid you are. But where I eventually realized I knew a lot of stuff, but my life didn't illustrate I knew it. You won't succeed if you don't believe you're worthy of success. If you don't change up here, it'll never change out there. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to become a humble student. And today people will see me at an event sitting at the back just taking notes. And they always come, like, it's weird now because I'm better known. People come up to me at events and say like, when are you going to speak? And I'm like, I'm not going to speak. It's like, why are you here? So I just want to learn. And people are like, kind of, they don't get it. Like, why do you just want to learn? Because I think when I made the commitment, that's it. I don't know anything. I don't know anything until my life illustrates that I know it, and so and I'm still, I think like that today, with a very high appetite for constant learning.
I don't know anything until my life demonstrates that I know it.
Yeah. That was actually a saying from my friend, Dr. John DeMartini. It's paraphrased, he said it slightly differently. That's what actually came to my mind when I was sitting there. And when I eventually got over the depression of asking why I was so stupid, I said, what can I do? And I remember John, 5 years prior to that, when I took him around the country talking on wealth, and he said, if you want to succeed with money, you need to learn everything you can about how to make more money, how to manage it better, and how to save it and invest it to create wealth. And he said, you don't stop until your life illustrates that you've got it. And I realized my life doesn't illustrate that I've got anything. Everything's going wrong, and my life is illustrating that it's going wrong. When I look back at my life, that's when it started to slowly started to elevate. And that strategy of continuous educational self-improvement is to me the number one strategy for success in the world. And it's actually been proven through studies that most of the most successful people in the world, 86% of the wealthiest people in the world believe in education, or continuous educational self-improvement. And that's why I do what I do, because I believe this is what people need to do. You need to become humble and go out there and learn and learn and learn it again and again and do it and learn it and do it. And I don't care how long it takes until your life illustrates that it's actually, you've got it.
But it started with the decision.
It's always the decision, right?
Yeah.
This concept of intention, which has been hugely powerful in my life, when you set the right intention, but you set it within the right context. And then, there was a stage in my life a few years after that where it felt like my entire life had been beating me down. Every time I tried to get up, like trying to get up from the ground, and you get knocked down all the time. And I remember saying, I used to stay on stage, it felt like life suddenly put its arm down, its hand down, and said, let me help you up. Before I went to Tony in 2012 early, I went and worked with John, and I'd known John for 5 or 6 years since I toured him there, and we'd been friends. And I remember I was still struggling to afford to go to New York to Tony, but a friend said, let's go and watch John. And I saw him speaking, and he got very emotional, because John can be very emotional about what he does. We're very kindred spirits like that. And I said, I'm going to go and do Breakthrough. And I just walked to the back and swiped my card. I said, that weekend. And then the next weekend I was leaving to go to Tony. And it was really about this thing called values that John had spoken about so often. And I'd really understood the concept, but never really bothered to figure out what were my actual values and was I being true to them. And this whole principle of being true to yourself and being congruent to who you are, that's when life with the right intention starts to serve you. And that's what shifted. And, to me, it's still one of the most single profound things that has affected my life. I work with, a lot of the most incredible teachers, and they all, don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying this is the only thing you need to do.
Sure.
Because to me it's a collection of all of them. But I just remember how profound learning that my life was about: connecting, learning and traveling. And those were my 3 highest values. And that's exactly as a business what we do today. We connect people in learning journeys on a global basis. We sit in Dubai filming this interview. And we get to work with the greatest teachers in the world, both in Africa but also outside of Africa. And we just connect people in learning journeys on a global basis. And that's the basis of who I was. And it was only in that realization and owning that and living true to that life really started to shift and change dramatically.
What is success?
That's one of the most profound questions, because everyone has a different perception of what it is. And yet we think it's this common thing. And so people, if I've got a room of 1,000 people and I say, what's success? And I start, you'll get 100 different answers. And so we define, and I think it's one of the best contextual definitions, is that success is not one of the 3 critical things, which is wealth, meaning, and freedom. It's all 3 of them.
Wealth, meaning, freedom.
Yeah. Some people pursue money and sacrifice relationships, and they're not successful in a real sense. Some people pursue, have really good relationships, but they sacrifice money. And then freedom, because, so we think of financial freedom, but that's just with regards to money. Freedom is really time freedom. I know people that are financially free, but they still work their backsides off.
Yeah.
Freedom is that choice. It's just having absolute choice to do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want, however you want, as much as you want. And it's like, and it's almost like a pipe dream. Like, will you ever have that complete freedom? But you're going to work towards it. So true success is these 3 fundamental elements together.
But what is success to you? Like, do you feel successful? Have you achieved success in your life?
If I looked at it from a more personal perspective, and if we got deeper into it, success is being congruent with who you are. It's being true to yourself. It's living a congruent life. When I say in a room, being true to yourself is probably the most important thing to success, they go, yes. But then you say, what is true to yourself? And I don't know. Because most people don't know. And that's, again, why I mentioned earlier why values are so important. That's what values actually are. They are determining what are the things that are most important in your life. So I can only speak from my experience, but truthfully, the more I live true to those things, the more I make my business, my life, my daily decisions and work around my 3 highest values that I live by, which is, like I said, connection, learning and travel, most amazing things happen. You attract positive people, positive circumstances, positive opportunities into your life. And that is, to me, probably the way you sum up what being successful is in terms of a practical thing, is being true to who you are.
What are you most grateful for?
I'm grateful for people believing in me. You know, like especially recently, looking at so many people come in and wanting to be part of our team and develop our business to the next level. And sometimes I kind of go like, all these people are looking at me, you know, to do something, and they're all going, what next, Brian? And I'm like, I'm truly grateful for that, because I mean, some incredible people. I mean, every one of my team just about, you know, I have such gratitude for, because they're there to support a vision. You know, there's very few people, I don't think there's anyone in our team that works for money. You know, they're there because they believe in what we believe in. And I think that that's a blessing. That's like a blessing I can never kind of fully comprehend in terms of that, because I could never do this without the right people around me.